Ripple just received conditional approval for a national trust bank charter. Not a crypto license, not a fintech permit, a national trust bank charter. The same legal structure that JP Morgan holds, that Bank of America holds, that Goldman Sachs holds. Ripple is not trying to work with the banking system anymore. Ripple is becoming the banking system. And while that was happening, the US government launched a strategic crypto reserve. It includes XRP. Kraken received Federal Reserve Bank access. Ripple applied for the same in 2025. PNC Bank, top 10 in the United States, just fully joined RippleNet. Bank of America has been quietly running XRP pilots for years. All of this happened. All of it is documented, and XRP is still sitting at 140. At some point, the price has to catch up to the reality. The question is when, not if. Let me be precise about what that National Trust Bank Charter actually means, because most coverage treated it as a regulatory footnote. A National Trust Bank Charter, issued by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, is one of the most powerful banking licenses in the United States. It allows the holder to operate across all 50 states simultaneously without needing state-by-state licensing. It gives the holder access to Federal Reserve payment systems. It places the holder under the same regulatory framework as the largest banks in America, and it signals to every institutional partner, every corporate client, and every regulatory body globally that Ripple is not a crypto company operating at the edges of the financial system. It is a federally chartered financial institution operating at the center of it. So here is the question that nobody is answering clearly. If Ripple now holds the same legal structure as JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs, and XRP is in the US Government Strategic Crypto Reserve, and Bank of America has been secretly running XRP pilots while publicly opposing crypto, what exactly is the market still waiting for before it reprices XRP to reflect what has already happened? That is what we are mapping today. The bank charter, the Fed access timeline, the Bank of America revelation, the PNC Bank deployment, and the global network of banks that are already on these rails processing trillions, while most retail investors are still debating whether XRP has a future. This is the calm analyst. No hopium, no narrative, no price targets attached to wishes. What I do on this channel is take the documented institutional moves, the regulatory filings, and the verifiable announcements, and read them structurally for what they mean, not for what we want them to mean. Let me now build the complete picture of what Ripple's conditional approval for a national trust bank charter actually changes, because the implications run far deeper than the headline. On December 12, 2025, Ripple received conditional approval for its national trust bank charter application from the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. This followed years of application, legal engagement, and the regulatory environment shifting under the new administration. Here is what this specific approval unlocks structurally. First, FedNow access. The Federal Reserve's instant payment system, FedNow, is available to federally chartered institutions. Ripple has been partnered with companies that facilitate payments inside the FedNow ecosystem, but with a national trust bank charter, Ripple can access FedNow directly, not through a partner directly. That means XRP-based infrastructure can be plugged into the same payment rails that process domestic US transactions, cross-border payments, domestic wires, real-time retail payments, all running through Ripple's infrastructure with XRP as the settlement asset. Second, cross-border payment dominance. Ripple already processes cross-border payments for financial institutions in over 40 countries. The bank charter adds the domestic US layer. Cross-border plus domestic plus real-time equals the complete payment infrastructure stack, the same stack that has historically generated trillions in annual transaction volume for the legacy correspondent banking system. Third, competitive legitimacy. When Ripple walks into a room with a bank partner, a government agency, or a central bank, it is no longer a fintech company asking for access. It is a federally chartered bank holding the same credentials as the institutions it is partnering with. That changes negotiation dynamics. It removes the regulatory hesitation, and it accelerates the deployment timelines for every pending partnership. But that's not even the part that surprised me most. What Bank of America has been doing behind closed doors while publicly opposing crypto. That is the piece that changes how you read everything else. Let me now address the Bank of America development directly, because it is the most structurally significant institutional revelation in this entire picture. Bank of America, the second largest bank in the United States by total assets, spent years publicly positioning itself as skeptical of crypto. Bitcoin was associated with money laundering. Crypto was described as high-risk speculative technology. The bank's public communications were consistently cautious and sometimes actively critical. During that same period, Bank of America was quietly running pilot programs using Ripple's technology, testing XRP as a bridge asset for transactions, building internal familiarity with the XRP Ledger's settlement capabilities, assessing how the technology performed relative to the correspondent banking infrastructure they currently operate on. Read that again. The institution publicly saying crypto is dangerous was privately testing crypto as a superior alternative to its own operations. This is not hypocrisy for its own sake. This is institutional strategy. You do not telegraph your technology transition to your competitors before you are ready to deploy. You pilot quietly. You build internal confidence. You wait for the regulatory environment to align. And then, when the framework is clear, when the charter is approved, when the legislative clarity arrives, you deploy at scale. Bank of America is not against XRP. Bank of America is waiting for the right moment to go live with XRP. And the National Trust Bank Charter, the Clarity Act, and FedNow access are the three conditions that define that moment. Now, before you conclude that this is purely a US story, you need to understand the global network that is already operational, because the institutions that have been waiting for US clarity have already been building the international infrastructure. And the combined transaction volume of what is already live should reframe what XRP at 140 actually means. Let me map the documented network of financial institutions that are already using Ripple's infrastructure, because the scale of what is operational today is not reflected in XRP's current price. In the Asia-Pacific region, SBI Holdings, Japan's largest financial institution and one of Ripple's oldest and most significant partners, Access Bank, Kotak Bank, Union Bank, China Bank, CM Commercial Bank, Wari Bank, Shinhan Bank, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Vietcom Bank. In North America, PNC Bank, top 10 in the United States with over 8 million customers across 19 states, now fully joined to RippleNet. Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, American Express, Cross River Bank. In the Middle East, Europe, Latin America, and Africa, additional financial institutions and payment service providers operating on Ripple's infrastructure. Combined, these institutions process transaction volumes measured in the trillions of dollars annually. And here is the critical structural point. These banks are not using Ripple's technology at full capacity. They are using it under licensing and regulatory constraints that limit how much of their transaction flow can route through XRP-based infrastructure. PNC going fully live, not as a pilot, but as a production deployment, is the template for what happens when those constraints are removed. When the Clarity Act passes and the National Trust Bank Charter is fully operational, every institution on this list has the regulatory clearance to expand from pilot volumes to full production volumes. The relationships are already established. The technology is already tested. The only thing that changes is the legal framework that allows full deployment. And that framework is weeks away. That brings us to the part most channels won't address directly, because it requires acknowledging something uncomfortable about how the Trump administration, the Strategic Crypto Reserve, and XRP are connected in ways that most people are still not taking seriously. Let me now address the government dimension, because this is the signal that elevates everything else from institutional adoption to sovereign endorsement. On March 2, 2025, Donald Trump announced the United States Strategic Crypto Reserve. The reserve includes Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, and XRP. XRP is in a US government's official crypto reserve, not as a speculative asset, as a strategic reserve asset alongside Bitcoin. The significance of this cannot be overstated. When a sovereign government includes an asset in its strategic reserve, it is making a statement about the long-term role of that asset in the global financial architecture. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve does not hold oil because oil is speculative. It holds oil because oil is strategic infrastructure. The inclusion of XRP in the U.S. Strategic Crypto Reserve is the government's acknowledgement that XRP is strategic infrastructure, not speculative technology. Simultaneously, Kraken, the crypto exchange, received Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City access in 2025, the first crypto company to receive direct Fed access. Kraken had applied for this in 2020. 5 years of application, legal engagement, and regulatory relationship building produced that result. Ripple applied for the same access in 2025. Given the current regulatory alignment with the new administration actively pushing for U.S. leadership in digital assets, the SEC and CFTC jointly treating XRP as a commodity, and Ripple now holding a conditional national trust bank charter, the timeline for Ripple's Fed access approval is not 5 years, it is months. When that approval arrives, Ripple will be simultaneously a federally chartered bank, a member of the US Strategic Crypto Reserve, and a direct participant in the Federal Reserve's payment infrastructure. There is no other crypto project that can say those three things at the same time. The National Trust Bank charter that places Ripple in the same legal category as JP Morgan. The Bank of America revelation that the institution was secretly testing XRP while publicly opposing crypto. The global bank network already on Ripple's rails processing trillions in pilot volumes. The US Strategic Crypto Reserve, including XRP and FedNow access approaching through a timeline that is now measured in months rather than years. Every single piece of this is documented. Every announcement is on the public record. Every regulatory filing is verifiable. This is the Calm Analyst, and this channel exists to read these signals structurally before the price reflects them, and without the emotional overlay that most crypto content applies to this story. If this analysis sharpens how you think about your position, subscribe right now. No hype, no speculation, just the documented institutional record. Every video subscribe, and let's bring this home with the final piece that explains why XRP's price at 140 is the most interesting number in finance right now. Let me bring the complete picture together. Ripple holds conditional approval for a national trust bank charter, the same legal structure as JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs. Bank of America was secretly running XRP pilots while publicly opposing crypto, a revelation that tells you everything about how institutional technology transitions actually work. PNC Bank, top 10 in the United States with 8 million customers, has fully joined RippleNet in production. A global network of banks across Asia Pacific, North America, the Middle East, Europe, Latin America, and Africa is already operational on Ripple's infrastructure. XRP is in the US government's Strategic Crypto Reserve. Kraken has Fed access, Ripple's application is pending, and the Clarity Act is weeks from passage. All of this has happened, all of it is documented, and XRP is sitting at $1.40. The price will catch up to the reality. The only question that matters now is whether you understood what the reality was before the price made it impossible to miss. Ripple is not trying to work with the banking system anymore. Ripple is becoming the banking system.